Welcome to the special lecture Symbolic Expression, and in the studio we have Manisha Sharma with us as sign language expert. And in the earlier lecture in which we talked about the portrayal of Indian values in Hindi cinema, we talked about the various films during the national movement, that how the ideals of the national movement they got reflected in the cinema of those times, and the various genres of the films which were made during that particular period. They were trying to reflect the concerns of the national movement, and we were talking about Duniya Na Mane, that how that particular film was talking about the issues of mismatched marriages, and how Shanta Apte, who played the female protagonist, refuses to consummate her marriage. And in that sense, we realized that this film was titled Kunukku. Kunku means vermilion, which is being applied by women in the parting of their hair. So, in that sense, we find that this particular film was quite revolutionary in the nature, and it was quite ahead of its times as well. And thereafter, we find that during the colonial period, number of films like Brandy Ki Bottle, which was talking about the ideas how we have to in a way go for prohibition, and how liquor is to not to be used in that sense. And in this particular film we find that how Gandhi was being praised by the filmmakers and the people those who acted in that sense. And we realized that V. Shantaram also made films like Padosi and Admi, and Padosi dealt with the issue of Hindus and Muslims, and how British they were trying to create a wedge between these two communities. And this particular film was also in a way appreciated by the audience, and we realized that how Admi, which was made by V. Shantaram in a way in reaction to Devdas, which was dealing with pessimism, and V. Shantaram acknowledges that this particular film Admi was in a way was a positive kind of a film, and he was in a way disillusioned with the kind of pessimism which was shown in Devdas, and he wanted to portray some kind of positivism or positive approach in this particular film. And we also see that there was a film called Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani, which was dealing with the issue of the medical mission which was sent by India. And this film was also dealing with the realist kind of a theme, because this actually happened during the 1930s when the doctor was sent from India. And we realized that such kind of picturizations definitely were trying to reflect the Indian value systems in their own way. And we find that when such kind of films they were being made, then the censorship authorities they were also trying to in a way cut scenes or dialogues which they found to be detrimental to the interests of the British. And it was not only in a way restricted to the Indian films, but at the same time many European and American films which talked about the ideals of patriotism or independence, they were also not being tolerated, and they were also being rejected by the censors. And one mention could be seen of a film called Kismat in 1943, where there was a song called Aaj Himalay ki choti se fir humne lalkara hai, दूर हटो है दुनिया वालों हिंदुस्तान हमारा है. And this kind of a reference was directly to the British, but when it was being examined by an Indian inspector, he made a report that the reference was to the Germans and the Japanese, as the lyrics contain their names and not to the British. And we find that British censorship, as I told you, was reactionary in nature. It was politically motivated, and they were not concerned with any kind of obscene films which had a lot of violence. And so they did not want any kind of nationalist ideals and values they should be exhibited to the audience. So that was their main concern. And Indians they realized that this was the design of the British, and this kind of a conspiracy was to attack the culture of Indians. And many of the magazines like Abhyuday and Film India, they in a way attacked the British and the kind of policy which was being followed by the British in terms of exhibition of films in India. And Abhyuday in a way launched a comprehensive attack against such British designs in its columns as well. We also in a way can see that how the kind of allegory which was being used by the Indian filmmakers to promote the ideals of the national movement, symbols like charkha etc., they were being shown, and photographs of Gandhi and Subhash, they were being shown in that sense in the films, and many a times they were not even relevant, but at the same time they were also being shown in the films. And we see that some of the filmmakers, they in a way devoted time in that sense to the position of women. Bimal Roy, for example, was one filmmaker who talked about the idea of emancipation of women, and they were also part of the social religious reform movements during the 19th century and thereafter. And we also find that how Mahatma Gandhi in a way urged women to participate in the freedom struggle, and many of them, they joined the national movement, and especially 1930 civil disobedience movement is considered to be one of the important movements where huge participation of women could be seen, that how these women came out of their homes and they participated in the movement. And we also see that how Constitution of India, for that matter, it also gave the principle of equality to all its citizens, and various kinds of trends relating to modernization and social change, they were bringing about a new sets of questions with regard to the position of women. And it has also been argued by scholars that how women portrayals, they had a lot of stereotyping, unidimensional characters, they were being shown, and women, they were not being shown in shades of grey, but rather they were being shown the shades of black and white, and how these kinds of distinctions between the heroine, the vamp, wife and the other woman, they were being shown, either women, they were being shown as docile, domestic, honorable, noble and ideal, and on the other way they were being shown as wayward, reckless and irresponsible, and women characters, they were being shown as epitome of virtue. So, such kind of accusations, such kind of criticisms, they have also been levelled against the people, against such kind of portrayals, and we find that some of the films of that particular period, for example, Mother India being one, and how this film was trying to show the reflections of good and evil through two sons, and how one son becomes a dacoit and the other one is who obeys in a way, and who is a very sincere kind of a person. And finally we see that how mother sacrifices her own son in the end to save the honor of a girl. So how women played by Nargis, who is shown as Mother India, she is shown to be an ideal wife and daughter-in-law and mother as well. And this film was criticized on the issue of being showing nation as mother, because that has been criticized by some of the scholars. But when we tend to understand such kind of portrayals, we realize that these kinds of values, they are intrinsic to human nature, but over a period of time humanity has lost these kinds of values, and people they in a way engage in the kind of violence or the kind of deceit which is there. And such kind of portrayals make us ponder, it in a way makes us to realize that how in a way we can contribute to such kind of values which are there in the society. Then we also find that Hrishikesh Mukherjee made certain films during this time, and many of the characters which the kind of films which were made by him have become so important, and they have left that kind of an impression where we find that they have been able to leave some kind of a mark in the society. And when we talk about the characters of Hrishikesh Mukherjee in so many films, his characters they have tried to communicate some of the values which are there in the society. They raise those kinds of questions where we find that those values need some kind of a place in the society, and these characters, they have definitely played an important role in that sense, that how such kind of portrayals are relevant from the social point of view. And one of the films is which has been one of the favorites, rather being the favorite of Rishikesh Mukherjee, as he acknowledged in one of the interviews, was Satyakam, which was made in 1969. And we find that when India became independent, and how some kind of a paradigm shift takes place, the idea of more growth is there, and this particular film talks about the issue of truth, honesty and commitment, and how they can be in a way seen against corruption. And we also see that the main character Dharmendra in a way marries Sharmila Tagore to redress the mounting guilt, and she bears a child whose paternity is never clearly established. And he is so honest that he does not want to make any dishonest compromises and changes jobs quite frequently. And the woman in the film, she tries to lead a normal life and longs to forget her past as well. And we find that this particular film is that the child publicly speaks out, saying that the real reason why grandfather is unsure of the paternity of the child, that whether the child actually belongs to Dharmendra. In that sense, that is why the child is not being accepted by the grandfather after the death of Dharmendra in the film. And this kind of revelation in a way humbles the grandfather, that how this kind of a child could share this issue in the public domain, and it was a very uncomfortable kind of a thing, and it would cause taunts and humiliation from the rest of the world. So this kind of an idea of truth, though it is being said that the story was taken from one of the Puranas, and how such kind of picturizations in a way talk about these kinds of values which are there in the society. Apart from that, we also see there was a film called Abhiman, where the relationship between the husband and wife is shown, and misunderstandings and ego, male ego, pride and chauvinism, jealousy, all these kinds of aspects, they are being shown through the comparative ability of the couple in the same field, and how the female protagonist becomes much more famous than her husband, and how their relationship deteriorates because of her success, where the husband is not able to digest her wife's success in that sense. And we find that such kind of picturizations, many of them, one of them Rishikesh Mukherjee's film Anand, which talks about the human values, the philosophy of life, and how death is to be seen as the ultimate truth and life is only a stage. And we find that the central protagonist or the main protagonist of the film, played by Rajesh Khanna, who exhibits so much cheerfulness despite knowing that he will die very soon. And the songs of the films like Zindagi Kaisi Hai Paheli Hai and Kahin Dur Jab Din Dhal Jaye, they add to the mood of the film, and their lyrics are also so meaningful, which shed a lot of light on the ideals of the kind of values which are there in that sense. And we find that apart from these films, Rishikesh Mukherjee also made a film called Bawarchi in 1972, where we do not find any kind of a violence and obscenity, and it also focused on spreading the family values and the morals, and how family has members who also mistrust each other as well, but they have to in a way to be together, and how their values and morals they have to be intact in that sense. And the protagonist role was played by Rajesh Khanna, who in a way diffuses the internal squabbles and he reunites the family. And we find that even the grandfather who is the patriarch, he develops some kind of a love for the male protagonist, and we find that protagonist in a way tells in the last that such kind of divided families has been seen by him, and he in a way decides to use his knowledge to stop such kind of divisions which are there in the society, and we find that finally family comes together as well. And when you talk about such kind of portrayals, then we see that the kind of sincerity which was exhibited by Jaya Bahaduri, who played a part in the film, and the positivity which is being shown and by her is also in a way can be in a way seen, or can be in a way realized in the society, that how one has to be positive even when things are denied to that particular person. And this film was also some kind of an inspiration for a film called Hero Number One. Then other films like Millie, we find that how a girl who is suffering from pernicious anemia, and who is considered to be untreatable, and her relationship with the male protagonist, and how both of them they go for treatment abroad, and the philosophy of life which is being explained as death is the ultimate truth. And there were other films like Amar Akbar Anthony, which was based on the lost and found theme, that how three brothers they get separated from their parents, and finally they are adopted by people of different faiths, Hinduism, Islam and Christianity, and how finally they unite to fight a common villain. So, film is also about the religious tolerance in that sense, and religious pluralism which has to be there in the society, and we find that how some kind of a merchandising strategy was also followed in this film, where three large erasers with the photos of the male protagonist, they were sold in the market as well. Then we find that when you talk about the Indian values, some of the films like Khoobsurat made in 1980, and how in this particular film Rekha who plays that kind of a role, where she is playful and naughty, and finally she appears to be very sincere in the end, who is ready to take all sorts of responsibility. And we find that such kind of films, they talk about the value systems which have to be there in the family, and how the behavior of women, whether the good or bad women in that sense, whether the women is ready to take the responsibility which has been assigned to her, or even when it is not assigned, if that responsibility could be assumed by her, that was also shown. And the focus on the family harmony, it was achieved by the understanding and informality. So, we find that how these ideas of independence, responsibility, they were being in a way combined in this particular film as well. And there was another film called Bemisal in 1982, which talks about the question of ethical and human values in society in the medical profession, and how Amitabh Bachchan, who has been raised by the father of Vinod Mehra in this particular film, who is an idealist or an ethical doctor, and on the other hand Vinod Mehra is not to be an idealist and ethical in nature. So, these kinds of values in the medical profession, they are being talked about in this particular film. And we also see that many films, they talk about the sense of responsibility, and apart from that a number of TV serials which were made in 90s, like 80s and 90s, like Ramayana and Mahabharat, both of them, how they talk about the victory of good over evil. They also focus on the issue of joint family, in which I think there was another film called Apne in 2007, in which Dharmendra, Sunny Deol and Bobby Deol played their parts, and it also focuses on the issue of joint family as well. And Ramayana and Mahabharata, for that matter, talk about the issues of sincerity of a son, the loyalty of Hanuman in that sense, and devotion of a brother Lakshman and the victory of good over evil. So, such kind of things they are being talked about, and the Indian traditions, human values and ethics, they are being communicated. And apart from that, in the 90s we also see films like DDLJ, where we find that both the couple or the boy and the girl, they decide that they have to take the consent of their father before getting married. So, these kinds of things, they are there in the Indian society, where we find that many times even love marriages, they are being arranged in that manner, keeping in mind the sensitivities of the family. And there were other films like Hum Saath Saath Hain in 1999. Again, they are talking about family identity and how family identity dominates the professional identity. And we also see that not only these films, but even animation films which are made for children, and they have a lot of themes like Krishna, Ganesh, Mahabharat, Ramayana, etc. And the coming of the multiplexes definitely has played an important role, where we find that such kind of films for the target audience could be made, and how children are the consumers of these films. We also see films like Lage Raho Munna Bhai, which talks about Gandhism and Gandhigiri, peace, truth and non-violence, and how such kind of films, they communicate these kinds of ideas which were there in earlier times, that how truth and non-violence, they are relevant for all times. And apart from that, Rang De Basanti, again dedication to die for a cause, or the kind of ethics which are there in the society, or the commitment of youth, these kinds of ideas, they are being raised. And we realize that some films like Three Idiots talk about the education system in India, and the idea that how competition is to be seen as a farce, and finally an innovative school started by a protagonist. So, all of this particular film talks about the education system and the kind of reform which is to be brought in them, human values and ethics, they have to be in a way seen, or in a way incorporated. And some films which became recently very popular, Bahubali and Bahubali 2, and we find that this also tries to communicate the conflict between good and evil, legitimate and illegitimate, and how some kind of commitment or the love for motherland is shown in the film. And you have to have some kind of a dedicated pupil or servants, like Katappa shown as a dedicated and loyal slave warrior. And all these films, despite this film was in Telugu as well as in Hindi, so they make some kind of a plea for the pan Indian cinema, where such kind of boundaries between languages, they are being done away with. And we also see another popular film, RRR, again which is talking about the idea of friendship and their fight against the colonial rule. And so such kind of portrayal definitely talk about the various kinds of values which are there in the society, and all these values which are many of them, these values are related to the issue of Sarvadharma Sambhav, and they also talk about the ideas of compassion, family commitment as well. So, with this I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.